Democrats now want to open up another investigation, this one against Moscow Mitch's old lady, Elaine Chao, who happens to be the Transportation Secretary of the United States government. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Um, all of Trump, I said early on that the Trump organization is like a mafia organization. Uh, George Bush's operation was more like just your run of the mill uh, crime operation. You had a bunch of gangsters that get together and steal stuff and lie and cheat. But Trump operates like a mafia organization, and that's by design. Look where he grew up. Look where he made money. Look what he dealt with in New York. I mean, Trump has been dealing with mafiosos since he was probably 14 or younger. But there's a mafia rule. The mafia families, I don't know what they're like now, I have no idea. But the mafia families, it was a cash operation, you might say. Nobody wrote checks. Nobody used credit cards. It was a cash operation. And the idea was, as you collected the cash and it worked its way up to the head of the family, you could steal a little bit. You could take a little bit. Just don't take too much. Depending on how much passed through your hands as it went up the chain. Okay, take a little bit. No, okay, it's quite. But the Trump gangsters, they take way too much. And this is what's getting Elaine Chao into trouble. So here's the way it's reported by Huffington Post. Democratic leaders on the House Oversight and Reform Committee said yesterday that they'd launched a probe into what they call troubling allegations against Moscow Mitch's wife, Elaine Chao, one of the longest serving officials on Trump's cabinet and the wife of Moscow Mitch. Chao has been accused of improperly using her office to benefit herself and the shipping company owned by her family. Take a little, but not too much. Because when you take too much, it gets everybody's attention. Especially the person up the chain. Hey, wait a minute, how much are you taking there? And it cuts into his take. In a letter to Elaine Chao, Elijah Cummings, and Raja Krishnamurti, both on the Oversight Committee, Democrats, noted that it's illegal for federal employees to use a public office for, quote, the private gains of friends, relatives, or persons with whom the employee, the federal employee, is affiliated in a non-governmental capacity. Well, Elaine Chao doesn't care about that crap. She's married to Moscow Mitch, and the monster in the White House can always pardon her. These members of the Oversight Committee, citing earlier reporting by the New York Times and Politico, said of Moscow Mitch's wife, Elaine, quote, several reports indicate that you have used your official position to benefit Foremost Group, that's the name of it, a shipping company owned by your father and sisters that is headquartered in New York and operates a fleet that transports materials to and from China. So Elaine Chao, the Trump Transportation Secretary and wife of Moscow Mitch, is involved, yes, she is, in drug smuggling. The Chinese are the ones who provide the fentanyl. The Chinese are the ones who manufacture this stuff and ship it to the United States so it winds up on the streets. How do you suppose it gets here? What better way to get here than in containers that are sealed because they are on ships owned by the Secretary of Transportation, who has dual citizenship, one surmises, with the United States and China, and who happens to be the wife of the Russian agent who now runs the Senate, Moscow Mitch McConnell. Just take a little. Don't take so much. Don't. Anyway, the the complaint or the beginning of the investigation and the letter sent to Elaine Chao says, quote, these reports suggest that you used your official position to elevate foremost groups' influence and status with the Chinese government. Adding that China had extended to the company, Elaine Chao's company, quote, hundreds of millions of dollars in low-interest loans, end quote. Just like Trump. Why, wife of Moscow Mitch, why don't you go to an American lending institution? I'm sure Goldman Sachs would love to do business with you. Huh? Or Chase. I'm sure they'd love to do business with you. I mean, after all, you're the wife of Moscow Mitch. You are the transportation secretary, but you go to Chinese lenders. I wonder why. According to the New York Times, Chao has no former affiliation or financial stake in the foremost group, but she and Moscow Mitch have reportedly received millions of dollars in gifts from Elaine Chao's father, James. And Moscow Mitch has also received millions in campaign contributions from Chao's dad and sister, Angela, who happens to be the CEO of Foremost Group. Representatives Cummings and Krishnamurti said Elaine Chao has until the end of the month to hand over a whole bunch of documents to the Oversight Committee, including copies of communications between Elaine Chao and her family members, as well as documents related to an official trip to China she took in 2017, and on and on and on. They just don't obey the Moscow rule. Oh, yes, we know. The company is in your sister's name and your daddy's name. It's an old trick, and the mafia has been using the trick for years. But Madam Chao, regardless of what your corrupt husband says or does, remember the mafia rule. Only pinch a little bit. Don't take too much.
Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. You have your choice. You can listen to the ranting with the audio podcast or listen and watch me lose control with a video podcast subscription. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.